Now, before we proceed with this episode, I have one huge favor I need to ask you. And that is, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please pause and take a moment to just click on the subscribe button right below. And by doing that, you will be helping the episode as well as the entire movement, which we now see ourselves as, to reach our mission. You may ask, what is our mission? Our mission is to promote the reading culture within the African continent and beyond. And you can imagine, if we are to accomplish that mission, we'll need a big community to spread the word out there, to spread this gospel of promoting the culture of reading, especially in our African continent. So now that you understand the mission, please subscribe to the button below and ensure that maybe you ask your friend who believe in this mission to join along, to subscribe and become the part of the movement as well. Now let's continue to the podcast. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this episode. I am Sibongiseni Mgolozeli, the founder and the host of this podcast. Now, today we have a special guest as usual, who is an author of a book called The Rise of the Sharing Economy. His name is Kevin Govender. And just a brief about him, I'll just read a brief bio at the back of his book, as I usually do with the other guests. So Kevin Govender is a partner and director at Deloitte. He is an experienced business enterprise architect and strategist who has led and advised a wide range of organizations and projects, both locally and globally, including large businesses and technology transformation programs, turnaround programs, strategy development, and business improvement initiatives across a diverse sets of industries. Kevin, thank you for joining me in this episode, and welcome to the Read to Inspire podcast.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
You are welcome. So just to start with an icebreaker question, as I usually do with my other guests, I would like to know, since you're an author, obviously you're an avid reader, I would like to know, when did you start reading non-academic books, and why do you think reading is important?
I think if you look at the literacy level in the country, reading gives you the ability to imagine. It gives you the ability to expose yourself to things that you've never known. And it also helps you with getting a diverse view of different aspects of life, business, and the world. And with that, even if you haven't traveled the world, it gives you exposure, which I think is very, very important in this day and age, especially for people getting to understand the diversity. And, we all talk about diversity. Diversity comes in different forms, shapes, and sizes. Yeah. It's diversity of people, diversity of thinking, diversity of how people live in different countries, different business models. So I think reading gives you that. And I think if you look at the world where it is, there's a lot of things to read, but, depending on what's of interest to you, you kind of work out. So I've, read a combination. If you study, you have to read the prescribed books, so that gives you. But then you also get to understand what's important to you, or what's of interest to you, and you shape your whole life around that. And then, you pick up an interesting book and you read.
Awesome. Towards the end of the show, I'll ask you at least 2 or 3 books that will prescribe for anyone, for them to develop themselves personally as well as into business, if they are interested in venture into business. Now, let's start with your book briefly, The Rise of the Sharing Economy. After reading the book, actually from the introduction, I realized that you converted your master's thesis into your book. And my curiosity was, what prompted you to convert your master's thesis into a book?
No, thanks for that question. Firstly, I won the Golden Key Award for groundbreaking research based on my book. And I saw some of the feedback from some of the external examiners to say, this is great work. Don't let it go unpublished. We would recommend you publish it and get it out there, because it's valuable information for other people and provides great insights. Mm. Because as you know, most people do their master's degree and it becomes file 13. It's filed away. Nobody gets to hear it. You don't even use it in most cases.
Mm.
So this was an opportunity for me to either do two things, either do a PhD on this or convert it to a book. And I chose to go the book route.
Great. And maybe the PhD will still come in the future.
Don't know.
Okay. And let me tell you this, Kevin, honestly, when I saw the cover of the book and I saw the word sharing economy, one thing that came to mind is a political party, EFF, for obvious reasons. But as soon as I read the book, I was like, okay, this has nothing to do with EFF. But perhaps, later on, as someone who want to explore their minds deeply and open their minds to other opportunities outside those you are sharing in the book. You might even think about advising the government using some of the principles here in terms of sharing the land with the population, but we'll need another book, maybe someone else who can see the need for that, and then write a book which will speak to the government and the need for the sharing of land, especially for some people who believe that that would be a great idea. Now, I would like to start from the beginning. You started in the first chapter by defining the rise of the sharing economy. For people who haven't read the book, can you maybe briefly describe and then entice them into getting more details into the book now? Just briefly describe the concept and maybe tell us why do you think we should all be aware of this rising concept that is dramatically changing different industries?
So firstly, the sharing economy is defined as a set of practices and economic models that through technology and community allows individuals and organizations to share access to products, services, and experience. So it is no longer about ownership. It is about sharing, and it's about an experience. And the reality is you don't need to own something to be able to experience it. So what you're finding is the economic model is based on sharing underutilized assets. So all of us own assets. Some of them, use more than others. And those that are unutilized can be put into an app or platform and shared and generate additional revenue from this excess capacity. Also, they have many names for it, right? There's access economy, access consumption, on-demand economy, platform economy, gig economy, peer-to-peer economy, trust economy, and collaborative assumption. These are all different names by which, or synonyms by which the sharing economy are referred to.
And then your book was published maybe shortly after COVID, and then you share some statistics in terms of the rate at which the gig economy, or whatever name you want to call it, the rate at which it was growing and how it was disrupting other traditional industry. Maybe 2 or 3 years later after COVID, have you had some updated statistics in terms of how the gig or the rise of the economy is doing in terms of numbers compared to other traditional industries?
Yeah, if you look at some of the areas that I looked at, for example, car sharing, accommodation sharing, book sharing, music sharing, media sharing, and bike sharing.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting fact is during COVID, as you know, accommodation sharing and car sharing took a large impact. There, we were put into quarantine. We were also not allowed to go out. So that had a major impact on the hotel and leisure industries, as well as retail, and as well as transportation, because those companies could not operate. But for example, companies like music sharing, media sharing, and bike sharing, they actually, during COVID, they actually excelled. Because what happened was there was a huge demand for bicycles across the world, because people realized I could ride a bicycle on my own. I'm not coming into contact with other people. So there was a huge surge in the number of bikes that were bought. So bike sharing was the one. Then if you look at, for example, music sharing, a lot of people were confined to their house. What do? They took up music, subscribed to Apple Music. There was a huge trajectory in Apple Music during the time where you saw music sharing going up. And this was because more subscriptions. The same thing with Netflix, DSTV on demand, all these media kind of things. There was a huge demand for these kind of services during that period. And that's exactly what happened during that. I mean, if you'd like some statistics, Airbnb statistics fell during COVID, but now you find that Airbnb, they're on the rise. People are going back to looking at accommodation, rare accommodation, and doing this. I think the other thing is Uber, I kind of think has blended out. What you found out there was a drastic decrease during COVID. Then there was an increase after COVID. It was like people fighting to get back to the world and get back to normal. And then I think if you look at all the Netflix, all these kind of capabilities, Netflix, Spotify, Deezer, YouTube Music, all that increased. And then, so I think that's where the world is going, right?
Yeah, I believe so. And maybe before we dive deep into each of the concepts you are sharing in your book, car sharing, accommodation, book, music, media, and so forth, as well as the opportunities that are available for ordinary South Africans to take advantage of, I would like us to start from looking in one of the statements that is recurring in your book. Maybe the first one is the question, is access a new ownership? Someone would ask, is that really the case? But like I said, to reiterate in your book, perhaps you can convince someone who is watching now, what do you mean by that? By re-emphasizing the fact that access is the new ownership.
So as I mentioned to you, I contrast what I call ownership versus access. Now, if you look at, for example, what is the fundamental difference between access and ownership? With ownership, you own something. And when you own something, you're responsible for the maintenance, the upkeep, the insurance, all these things that cost a lot of money and require space. There's definitely a shortage of space. People are moving more, from the rural areas into urban areas. So what's happening is, for example, let's take CDs. If you're an Advent music lover, you probably had a few favorite artists, and you had a whole collection of CDs that you needed space to keep. But what has happened is, with the likes of Apple Music, Spotify, the world has changed. You don't need to own these music anymore because you have access anytime, any place, anywhere, you just subscribe and you have access to this music. All you need is a device and Wi-Fi capability, and you have this. Same thing with music, with videos. People had a lot of, again, favorites where they kept them, stored them, stacked them. You have to maintain them. You have to insure them, take care of them. But with things like Netflix, Amazon Prime, DSTV, DSTV Now, you can access whatever you want, whenever you want. So you don't need to pay. So there's definitely a trend and a shift in the behavior. And remember, this all talks about consumer behavior, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a shift in how consumers view these things. Some people feel that I've never owned before. So you get two contrasting views, right? Some people have never owned before. So the whole thing about ownership is a sense of achievement. So when I did my study, I interviewed people from different backgrounds just to understand how important access and sharing. And there were definitely some people who felt that ownership is very, very important because they come from very poor backgrounds, very humble backgrounds. They did not own a house. They did not own a car. Their parents didn't own. They walked to work. They walked to school. So now to buy your first car or buy your first house became a sense of achievement. Owning your own CDs, your own DVDs was a sense of achievement. But as people evolve, they realize it's no longer about the ownership. It's about the access and the experience. And I don't have to own something to experience it. If that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. Yes, it does. And
let me give you a phenomenal example where it goes on the other extreme. I spoke about poor people or people coming from humble beginnings wanting to own. But as you know, a lot of very super rich people in the world own their own private jets. But what they realized is, like, for example, car ownership. If you own a car, your car is only utilized 8% of the time. 92% of the time, your car is parked away. Now you can imagine if you own a car and you're only using it 8% of the time. If you own a jet, can you imagine how often you're using it? It's underutilized probably 98% of the time, using it 2% of the time.
Mm.
So what people have done, you've decided, I'm not gonna, it doesn't make sense to own this jet. It's so expensive. You got to keep it in a hangar. You got to maintain it. You got to pay insurance, and this has cost us a lot of money. So what they did, they now sold off the jets. Somebody has created a sharing economy on jets, that they've acquired these jets. And then when rich people want to travel, you just commission a jet, or you just reserve a jet. So you only use it when you need it. And when you don't need it, you don't have to pay all these unnecessary costs.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. And for me, actually, that was one of the concepts that convinced me that this is actually a very attractive business. For instance, if you look at the accommodation sharing, the burdens of ownership that comes with having to maintain the property and all those things, I was quite convinced why access is the new ownership. And maybe as you were doing your research, you consulted a lot of people, like you said, as you were doing your research, you read a lot of articles, including books. I just want to find out from you the insights that you got from this one book that I haven't read by Klaus Schwab, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, in relation to the concept of the sharing economy. What were your key takeaways and insights from that book?
I think the first thing is, maybe I must just read a few quotes by Klaus. The fourth industrial revolution is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and the biological sphere. I think that's a very profound, saying by him, right? So if you look at that, what's happening with the world is there's blurring of lines. It's the physical and the digital coming together. For example, if you look at car sharing, there's a physical car, but the technology platform has brought the ability to demonstrate what cars are available, what class of cars are available, and for you to be able to transact and go from one point A to point B by not owning this car, but just getting onto an app, requesting a car from where you want to go. And before you even, the good thing is you also know what the total cost, how long is it going to take you to get there, and what's the average cost is going to cost you before you get him in the car. I mean, that's information at your fingertips. The industrial revolution, which has brought these together, because if you look at the industrial revolution, it's various components coming together, right? Now, if you look at, for example, taking it a step further in South Africa, we launched the fourth industrial revolution in South Africa, that was launched by Cyril Ramaphosa, and where he says South Africa has chosen to be a country of the future at a time when the world is changing at a pace and in a manner that is unprecedented in human history. Revolutionary advances in technology is reshaping the way people work and live. Unless we adapt, unless we understand the nature of the profound change that is reshaping our world, and unless we readily embrace the opportunities it presents, the promises of our nation's birth will forever remain unfulfilled. So the 14th revolution is an era where people are using smart, connected, and converged cyber, physical, and biological systems and smart business models to define and reshape the social, economic, and political spheres. So, it's profound. And the reality is we have to take advantage of this, because if you look at a country like South Africa, we have close to 32% unemployment. People have problems getting access to capital. It is very difficult. So the sharing economy makes it possible for those kind of people. Now, and to give you a quick example, a lot of people cannot afford their own cars, right? But you can borrow a car, you can register it on Uber or Bolt, and you can start making revenue by not even owning this car, because you borrow the car, but you register it on the platform, you make money, and by making money, you are able to pay for the car, for the rental of the car. You are able to pay for petrol and all your expenses, and you are able to make a profit to be able to become unemployed and contribute to society.
Do rental industries allow that to happen, to rent a car from them and then use it for Uber purposes?
Yes. So what's happened is there's some companies that have actually created companies to be able to lease. There's some people in South Africa that own over 120 cars. They buy these cars and They make it available to people who do not have access to a vehicle, who want to be subscribed to the Uber platform. They lease this car out to them, and the cost of this car could be anything depending on the type of car. Newer, further, like the what we call Uber Black, which is the BMWs, the Audis, the newer ones, which are less than 5 years. People get those cars for around 5,000, borrow it for or rent it for like 5,000 Rand a week.
Wow.
Then the lower model, the Uber X's, they can get it for around 3,000 Rand a week. But then if you look at it, people are making sufficient money to be able to pay for the car, pay for expenses, and then make a profit, at least 2,000 to 3,000 Rand a week. And if you take that a month, they're making close to anything from 8 to 10,000 Rand or to 12,000 Rand profit. But obviously, the world has changed, even South Africa. People are traveling less. The cost of living has become extremely expensive. So there has been a decline in the amount of people using Uber and Airbnb as well. Purely because of affordability, they become cost constrained.
Right. And then maybe while we're still talking about the fourth industrial revolution, you mentioned that the president had some things to say about it and in terms of the projections for the future and how it's going to disrupt the livelihoods of South African. Now, in your book, you mentioned that you're part of the fourth industrial revolution digital summit, which took place around 2019. And later on, as I was reading that passage in your book, I also learned that I think later on there was a commission that was developed. I think it was the Presidential Commission of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which was disbanded. Correct. I was then curious, why was that the case? Do you know maybe the reason why it was disbanded?
I don't know, but remember, the commission was put together for a very key purpose. They had to come up with what was the priorities to make it work. So they identified 8 priorities, which they call the Fourth Industrial Revolution of South Africa, the 4IRR Commission report that was published. Now, this team was put together to be able to come up with that, because remember, there's 2 parts. There's always the first part where you need to define, you put a commission together to define what needs to be done. And then the second part is to implement. Now, sometimes the people who are put together to put up strategy are not necessarily the best people to do implementation. So remember, they've met their objective, right? That report was published and made available, and it's available to everybody. I mean, I don't want to go into detail, but the 8 priorities that came out of that was human capital, SA to invest in people, to acquire the skills to navigate the fourth industrial revolution. That was the first thing. The second thing was artificial intelligence institute, creation of an artificial intelligence institute to manage it, platform for advanced manufacturing, data to capture innovation, future applications, platforms, and industries of the fourth industrial revolution, the fourth industrial infrastructure, the policy and regulation to regulate the industry, and the last one, the 8th one, was the fourth industrial revolution strategy implementation council. So part of that was SA to establish a 4R strategy implementation coordination council within the presidency to implement this, because the story is it's very good to get people, academics come in, they visit countries, they come up with some nice concepts, but we failed to implement it. So that's why the 8th priority was to put a council together, coordination to be able to do the implementation. And now you need to build the right forums who can actually implement these 7 things, put in policies, infrastructure part.
Yeah. And I think, as you explained in the book, the key takeaways from that summit were quite interesting in terms of moving the country forward. That's why I got a bit disappointed when I heard that it was disbanded before those, principles or policies could be even implemented. So I don't know, maybe, in terms of politics in South Africa, we can have great ideas, but in terms of implementing those ideas that can even take us out of even beyond the poverty line, it's just disappointing, to be honest. But then, like, moving forward with your book now, For an ordinary South African, maybe someone who falls under that statistics of unemployment, you mentioned something close to 32%. And I see a lot of business opportunities, as you're explaining in your book, in all these different industries, car sharing, accommodation sharing, and so forth. But before we get there, I want to differentiate between, as you explain in your book, the differences between entrepreneurship and business creation. So, for instance, you talk about innovation entrepreneurs as well as micro entrepreneurs. Can you tell the differences between those two concepts?
I think that's a very interesting question, and we always get that mixed up, right? The difference between, for example, you get entrepreneurship and you get micro. The difference is, as you know, with entrepreneurship, you need capital, and normally large amounts of capital to be able to kick off a business. But with micro entrepreneurship, you don't need much. So just to give you the definition, micro entrepreneurs are people who are making money from the assets and skills they already own. So you own this already. These micro entrepreneurs have turned idle or underutilized assets such as cars and spare bedrooms from a financial burden into one that creates an income. Now, I gave you an example. There's certain people that work during the day, and because they can't make ends meet, they actually drive Uber at night. In some cases, they own a car, but as you said, let's take the poorest of the poor.
Yeah.
They don't own a car, but what they've done, they were able to go rent a car, register on Uber, have their license, rent a car, and use that car that they don't own to make money. That's a micro entrepreneur, because think about it, you didn't need much to start this business. But if you look at entrepreneurs, the world needs entrepreneurs and inventors to create products and services.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship is defined as the activity of setting up a business or businesses taking on financial risk in the hope of profit. So you take on financial risk. In Uber, you're not taking on much risk. If, for example, you have a spare bedroom at home, you had an outbuilding that probably you had kids at home and they lived there, and now they've gone off to university or they've left home. It's underutilized. You can convert that into an Airbnb and generate additional income.
That's right.
And then another thing you could do, just to expand on that, you could say, okay, you know what? I'm at home. I'm providing you this Airbnb, but I can also help you with your breakfast and your dinner, and I can also maybe help you with your laundry. And for those things, I'll charge additional costs. Now, that's a way of making money, because, as I said, a lot of people are finding it very difficult to make ends meet. The cost of living has gone up. By doing these extra things, you are able to save your house, you are able to generate additional income, and you are able to provide a service which could be used.
Absolutely. And maybe before we move to other economies that can be shared here, let's start with bike sharing. Let's say someone has got a couple of bikes at home that they are not using. How can they follow the concept of Uber, or what apps or what companies they can partner with in order to utilize their assets which they possess and make money out of them to make themselves micro entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, if you look at, let's take, for example, the first one, Upcycle. Upcycle is a company in Cape Town that created bike sharing. There's another guy in Alexandra, Mulutsi Alexandra Tours.
Yeah.
He actually took bikes and he made it available to school children for 2 rand. It wasn't about the money for him. It was about children traveling very, very far or walking very, very far distances to get to school. So he started off this thing by letting kids borrow the bikes for 2 rand a day. And he started this whole lucrative business. So if you think about it, if you want to start a bike sharing company, to be able to provide bikes to people to rent and get some revenue out of that, great idea.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about peer-to-peer sharing. 2 things, maybe for someone who wants to utilize their skills, like someone is a service provider. Let's talk about, for instance, Sweep South. How can someone who's a domestic worker or someone who is a gardener can partner with Sweep South and then make money out of that? How does that concept work?
Well, if you look at Asha Pando, right? She's the CEO. She and her husband, they went and bonded their assets to be able to start Sweeps Out. They managed to get a 10 million rand funding to start the platform. And just to put it in context, Sweeps Out is an organization that takes domestic workers, puts them on a platform, and allows them to be able to work for other people, to be able to book a service, charge for the service that they do, and get paid for the service. But also, one of the issues that Asha was wanting to address, it was the poor treatment of domestic workers in our country. And as you know, a lot of mothers are domestic workers, and they work very, very hard to be able to put their kids through school and feed those kids. And now you can imagine getting abused or not being well treated by the people you work with. So Asha was able to create this platform, which allowed domestic workers to be registered on this platform. And the whole advantage of it is that there was a two-way rating. So if they were not happy how they were treated, they could actually rate the person they were doing the job for very, very poorly. And then what happens is they don't have to work for them again because they will not be able to pick them. So that was the one thing that done, right? And remember, there's a huge amount of unemployment in the country. And by registering these people on the network, they were able to provide the service. Now, it started off as a platform purely for domestic work, but what they did is they've scaled the platform now in Africa as well. They partnered with other companies. But in South Africa, they also launched the ability to do other things like garden services, washing windows, doing additional things. So what this does, it gives a further amount of people to get into other disciplines of manual work. So domestic, garden, cleaning your pool, cleaning your windows, and just increase the number of people that could register on this platform. And also with the diverse skills to be able to provide other types of services. And remember, at the end of the day, there are certain people who have access to money. They don't have the time to do certain things. So they're happy to pay somebody to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where most South Africans who are not necessarily like owning like property, they can take advantage of that side. Because I believe you all have certain skills that you possess that you can be able to make money out of them. Like, for instance, one person is a plumber, like you were mentioning, domestic worker, and so forth and so forth. Now, for someone like that who wants to know exactly how do they register with Sweep South, and also how do they register, and how do they market themselves to Sweep South so that they are able to be known as well as being utilized in their respective areas anywhere in South Africa?
So if you look at Sweep South, they have a website. You can go onto the website and you can actually say you want to become a sweepster. So that's what they term them. You can go register on the platform. Then there's a whole accreditation process that they run in the background to be able to accreditate. Because remember, the other thing, if you are getting somebody to come to your house to be able to do work, reputation, credibility, criminal checks, those things are important because you want to know, like just how you're riding in Uber, that this is somebody that is safe and not going to harm you. It's the same thing with the domestic workers. So they go through a very strict accreditation process. Once they pass the registration, you registered, and then you can also define in which areas you want to work, when you're available to work, and the rates are prescribed. And the good thing with Asha Pando, she's also giving back quite a bit in the sense that I can't remember the actual statistics, it's written in my book, but in terms of the membership or the cost that she charges and the percentage she gives back, a large amount is given back to the actual person doing the work, and the administration fee is not as high. If you look at Uber, for example, Uber charges a minimum 25% fee to use the platform. In terms of Asha, she's realized it's about getting the numbers on it, reducing the cost of the service, and giving back to those people. And the good thing is what they've also done is she's made sure when they design the cost and the fee structure, it's above the minimum wage. So that's another thing that she did quite well, was to be able to understand legislation, regulation, look at the safety of the domestic, but also at the same time create a structure that would benefit them in minimum wage, above the minimum wage.
I see. I see. When it comes to books and media sharing, okay, maybe we can start with book sharing. Maybe for someone who's not an author and maybe they wanna start business, they love books, they love reading books, and perhaps they wanna follow that concept of using maybe Uber services, Airbnb services. How can someone get involved or become a micro entrepreneur using the book sharing platform?
Well, if you look at the book sharing platform, like for example, when I was doing my master's, it is very expensive to buy books.
Yeah.
So some articles, I went and bought it for 1 hour. I use the sharing economy. You go and you say, I want this document for 1 hour. You pay like maybe $5 for 1 hour. The minute you activate it or access the document, the counter starts counting down, and at 1 hour it's gone. So you either read very fast
Okay.
or you will note very fast. So that's what I had to do. So the reality is there's a lot of people love books. There is a lot of bookstores. If you look at the book sharing is the concept, is the traditional library services. You know, you go to the library, you subscribe to the library, you borrow the book, but you only pay, in most cases, you pay a registration fee and you get the book for free, especially the municipalities. But if you do not provide the book on time, where they made their money is fines for late. And that's where, for example, the video stores made money. They gave you the book for 30 Rand, but if you didn't bring it on time, they charge you heavy penalties, and that's where they made a lot of money as well. So if you want to get into the book sharing thing, it's about creating a platform, putting books there that you want. The problem is you need to determine how you do this, whether you do it physically or digitally. If you're sharing books digitally, you got to have all of them in ebooks format. If you're doing books, and those exist, right? You can go to Amazon, you can buy the books from there, or you can lease the books from there. And if you want to do it physically, you need a place where people can come and collect the book from, read the book and return it, and maybe charge a fee for it. And one way of getting something where you put a code, you put a coin in and you take the book, but you got to trust people that they'll return the books as well, right? So there's an underlying, call it, key building blocks that need to be in place for these things to work.
Okay, let's continue from there. My next question now, maybe since we just spoke about book sharing, for media sharing, how do you go about, let's say music, how do you go about in making money out of that industry?
Well, I think if you look, firstly, there's been a lot of controversy across the world about the artist and what they put the music onto these platforms.
Yeah.
And then you would expect that you get paid for when people access your music. Every time they access your music, you want to get some royalties. So the one way is having an agreement to put it in, agreeing what the fee structure is for your music, and then reaping the benefits of the value of the number of people accessing your music. And obviously, it's a difficult one because these platforms want to make money as well. They want to control that. So there needs to be the ethical behavior, just like how artificial intelligence on the sharing economy, you got to have very clearly defined rules. There isn't any much institutes available. There is an institute in UK that regulates the sharing economy, but in South Africa, there's nothing. So I think that's one place where the legislation, regulation, which I do speak about in my book, that is somewhere where there needs to be some work done in regulating, because as you know, most of these sharing economy, they just start up. They don't look at legislation. They say, okay, let's just start it up and then we'll comply later. So you can look at how the Uber is not in every country anymore. It's in some countries, not in other countries, because of policies or not subscribing to that. They've been asked not to be in certain countries. So getting back to the media sharing, remember, if you're an artist in South Africa and or you're a musician, you subscribe to this, you work on an agreement of putting your music onto that platform and working out and that's how you do it, right?
Okay, now I think my last question is related to the percentages that each company is taking. For instance, if we're talking about Uber, what percentage are they sharing? And maybe on a monthly basis, if someone decides they have a car, they are not using much, how much are they looking to make on a monthly basis if they are in a big city like Pretoria, for instance? they are there full time using their car for for the Uber business.
So if I look at it, as I mentioned, if I look at, I think Uber charges around 25% as a fee for people to use their platform.
Mm.
Um, then, I speak to a lot of people driving Uber and trying to get an understanding, is it lucrative?
Mm.
Before the pandemic, it was definitely very lucrative for these guys.
Yeah.
And they were making good money, on average, where you worked as a laborer, you could probably get 4,000 a month.
Mm.
Using Uber, they were getting between 10 and 12,000 a month.
Wow.
So it was a benefit for them. I think post-COVID, the number of people traveling has reduced, not as abundant.
Mm.
Also, some routes are more lucrative than the other.
Mm.
Some people think the longer routes are more lucrative, but sometimes the shorter routes are more lucrative, depending which you are.
Mm.
Remember, Uber also has surge pricing, depending the time of day you use and the demand. The higher the demand, it goes into higher rates.
Okay.
So I would say people are making around 10 to 12,000 rand. I'm talking per driver, per one car, having one car.
Wow.
And doing that. Obviously, there is cost involved. If you have your own car, then it's cost of fuel and levies, there. But if you don't have your car, you got to hire a car. And as I said, it could be anything from a small car from 2,500 to 5,000 rand a week for hiring this car.
Yeah.
And if you're making around 4,000 rand, 3.5 to 4,000 rand profit a week. So you could get anything from, and it also depends how many hours you work. Some people work for 10 hours a day. Some people work for 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because so it all depends. So it all depends on how many hours you're putting, which routes you're doing. Are you doing peak, non-peak? What car are you driving? Because if you're driving a car less than 5 years, so those are the kind of things. Yeah.
Okay. Now for accommodation sharing, Uber, Airbnb, how much are they taking?
So I can't remember the numbers exactly, but what I read when I did an analysis, that average person rents out their property for like 26 days a year. And with 26 days, I think if I was looking, there was around a number of 29,000 rand or something you can make as an average.
Wow.
To do that. So those are in terms of numbers there. If you look at Uber, it started off by the number of users. It was low, right? If you look at Airbnb worldwide, it started off in 2016 at $2 million. Now it's they talk about $193 million in 2020. So it's obviously moved up. The other thing big in Airbnb is obviously shortage of student accommodation.
Yeah.
So how can you use that? So there's a big there. And then the other thing that's done, Sweeps Out has collaborated with Airbnb to do the cleaning for the Airbnb. So there's other sharing that's come out. What else can I tell you?
I think that's enough, because I just wanted to get like an average if you are putting your house.
Maybe to give you this, I can give you this, right? In South Africa in 2020, around the 20, according to the Airbnb South Africa statistics, there were about 35,000 hosts in South Africa. The average number of hotel nights booked was 17. The average age of the host, the person that owned the Airbnb, was around 45 years old. The number of guests that we had was about 2 million, and the average night they stayed was 4.3. And then the average in terms of the split between the foreigners and South Africans, 63% of the people were from foreigners, and 37% of those people were South Africans. And the average age of the visitor was 37 years.
Okay.
So you can imagine that, right? And just in South Africa, when Uber started in 2014, the number of guests was about 18,000, I think. It went to 125 in 2015. 394,000 in 2016. 2017 was about 651,000 guests. And in 2018, it went over 2 million guests.
Wow.
So I can only imagine now, almost 5 years later, we're probably looking at about double that number of people that are using Airbnb.
Wow. And then now in terms of estimation in value terms, in rent terms, for someone who's renting out their house for Airbnb, how much are they looking to make? Let's say maybe the range can make a profit of up to 10 to 12,000 on a monthly basis from Airbnb.
Yeah, and remember, there's I need to just state this, right? It depends location.
Yeah.
Location, one, right? It depends how big the apartment is. It a house? What facilities it has? Does it have a pool? What's available immediately next to it? Because that there gives higher rates.
Okay.
So if you look at it, and it also depends the period. December period to get Airbnb, like in Cape Town, Durban, is the popular places is also all gone out.
Yeah.
And that's when the prices go up. You can make a lot of money. You can give, a property that's normally given for 2,000 Rand during the non-peak. During peak, it's about could be 4,000, 5,000 a night.
Wow.
So that's what happens because it's surge pricing. There's a huge demand. So they put the prices up and they get there. So there's a lot of that happening in terms of accommodation happening as well.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, lastly, let's talk about Sweep South. Someone has got these skills and they want to affiliate with SweepSwipe and make money. And let's say you are in a very busy location, like let's say Johannesburg. And there also, how much is Sweep South taking on the percentages? And then how much is the salary does the person who provides the services can expect to get on a monthly basis?
Yeah, just I'm trying to just get a sense of. I did this a while ago, so let me just see if I can find the information, right? So if we look at, for example, the booking rate on average, Sweeps Out charges 38 Rand an hour on the platform with no hidden costs, right? The booking rate for Sweeps Out is an average between 80% and 96%, while during their first 2 to 3 months trial, they receive 65% of the booking rate. The average booking time is 7.1 hours. So that's the number of hours they booked for, or about 210 Rand a day. This equates to around 4,000 Rand a month. The minimum wage for domestic workers was 19 Rand from 1st of March. The minimum wage for domestic is still less than the general minimum wage, which was increased by 4.5 and currently stands at 21 Rand 60 per hour. So what I'm saying is, if you look at it, you can get about 4,000 Rand. Now, remember, this we're talking about a few years ago as well.
Yeah.
So I would think now the good news is it's above the minimum wage. The share that they take is low, so most of the money is given. So by working as a domestic worker, an average of 7 hours a day, you are able to walk away with. If you look at if we say 21 Rand 69, right, that's per hour. And if you're working an average 40-hour, just say 160-hour week, times 21.69, that's 3,470. And if you're using a rate of 38 Rand, just say 160 times 38, that's 6,000. So obviously they take a cut of it, but you're still walking away with a higher minimum wage, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking now all these apps, some are available through an app, are all these service providers available? Let's say, for instance, Sweep South, do they also have an app whereby if someone wants to access their services, can just download an app and then register in the app, or they use a website where they need to?
Yes, most of them are applications or apps, and they've created this. Sweep South does have its own app. If you look at another interesting business that's taking over the world is agriculture, Hello Tractor. And there's a company in South Africa called AXL. in South Africa, there's, as you mentioned earlier when we started this conversation, there's a huge amount of land that's owned by government.
Yeah.
Now you think about it, that land is just there. If that land can be not given, but leased to people out there who have the skill to do farming,
Yeah.
then you can get companies like Hello Tractor, AXL, who can help with, because you can't afford access to buy your own equipment and machinery. You can lease them and you can actually cultivate that land. And just to give you an example, if you had a 1 hectare land, 10,000 square meters of land, if you had to do it manually, it'll take you about 21 days to do it. But if you had a tractor, it'll take you 1 day, you can do it. Can you imagine the productivity and the efficiency? So there's so much of land available. We can make these services available to people who have the skill in doing this, and we can start increasing our agriculture and the land. That wasted land that's sitting there can start generating revenue. It can help the farmer or the person running the land. They can give money back to the government. It's another way of the taxman, because if you look at the tax, all they want to do is increase our VAT, increase our tax, increase sin tax, and tax the people that are paying tax more higher and higher. This is another way of generating funds. The other thing in government, they have, Ministry of all agriculture, home affairs. There's certain assets that are common across them.
Yeah.
In some places, the assets are overutilized, and some places the assets are underutilized. If they create a common platform, they could share these assets across government and reduce the cost expenditure, and more money will be available to invest back in the country.
Yeah, now that you've made that explanation, it makes a lot of sense. And I believe this is actually something that the government needs to look into in details. If any of the policymakers out there in the government can read your book, I'm sure even their minds could be open to think about leasing the land and using these services like AXL in terms of tractors, more specifically for those people who want to go into farming and maybe they are in rural areas, they are starting like small scale farming, they don't have equipments. This could be a lucrative business for them as well. So thank you for mentioning that. From my side,
I think that sorry, just to make one thing, I think what's important is how do we get, I'm willing to partake this knowledge because I think there's huge opportunity for this, for government to use the concepts of business models, the alternative business models to be able to do things differently and generate a lot of revenue. But it's how do you get to the right people to convince them that there's some merit and some value in doing these things? And I think that's where the challenge is.
that's a good challenge. And you know what, I could even go into at length at trying to find the people who can be able to look into these ideas that are actually have a high potential to even take the economy of the country as a whole into the higher level. It's just that sometimes, when you are led by people without a vision, you cannot go anywhere because they have a different agenda of their own. So something that will benefit the country is not in their interest. So anyways, thanks, Kevin. I think from my side, I'm done with my line of questioning. I just want to find out from you, is there anything perhaps you might think we might have missed in the book that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I think we didn't speak about business models, so I can speak about that quickly. If you look at the world, we always had this vision that, or this notion that a company can only have one business model. But my view is very different. You can have more than one business model in one organization. And I talk about compete and collaborate strategy. A lot of organizations say I must only compete, but I can't compete and collaborate. I think that's nonsense. I think the world has changed. I think what has happened now is you can have a dual strategy. You can define where you want to compete and where you want to collaborate. All you need to do is define very clear rules of engagement of where you're competing and where you're collaborating. And lots of companies, for example, IBM I work for IBM. I actually work for IBM. I'm an executive partner at IBM. And we do the same. We have our own products where we compete with other companies, but we also collaborate with the likes of Amazon Web Services, SAP, Microsoft Asia, where we collaborate with them. So you need to clearly define where you want to compete and collaborate and define the rules of engagement and do that. And that can be in lots of organizations, because the other thing is there's a lot of common challenges that are faced in lots of the similar industries. Sharing gives you the ability to say, how can we jointly and collaboratively address these common problems? And then we can still say these ones we're willing to collaborate, but on those that differentiate us as a company, we're going to compete. And you
Yeah.
define the rules of engagement. And that's what's important.
And then that statement, now I'm reminded of the industries of hotels, because the Airbnb business is taking over. And I think it's one of the industries that I believe are still not looking to collaborate, but they want to compete. And, in terms of when you compare the prices, the hotels are usually more expensive than Airbnbs. And you started by mentioning the models, business models. Their models, they don't open room for collaboration. And what do we have to advise those businesses that are, especially the hotels or owners of the hotels? What word of advice do we have for them, especially looking at the projections of how the Airbnb business is taking over?
Well, if you look at it, during high occupancy or high demand times, there's no need to maybe to collaborate. But in low season, you could look at, and if you got low occupancy, how do you find an alternative way to make those rooms available? And maybe you can partner with Airbnb and say during the low season, we'll make the rooms available to you. And you can do that. That's a way of collaborating. So you still compete and they could work out a share of the revenue, right?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thank you, Kevin. And now that I'm done with my questions, maybe from my side, two more unrelated to the book now. Since you are an author, obviously, there are some books that have made a significant impact in your life. Can you maybe name two book titles and authors and maybe briefly explain why do you think they made an impact in your life?
Yeah, I think the one book, my favorite book is called The Alchemist. And the reason for that, it's when you do introspection and you look internally, um, I think that's what the lessons comes out of there, right?
Yeah.
There's a saying that this too shall pass. If we look at the world we're living in, it's polycrisis, right? There's a lot of changes happening all at the same time. The crisis, and the reason they call it polycrisis is because there's so many things happening at the same time. This is unprecedented. People don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah.
So, so this too shall pass. It's about having the faith, having the resilience, and being able to do that. I think that's one of my favorite books. Um, the other one is, I'm trying to remember which one. I think Robin Sharma, right? He's written a lot of books on leadership.
Yeah.
He's written a lot of books on people, personality, and how you bring in the inner side. The monk who lost his Ferrari, who sold his Ferrari, for example. You look at those kind of books. It's inspirational because it gives you an opportunity to look inside. It gives you an opportunity to understand different perspectives because the world is run by very capitalized, so money is like the be all and end all. Some people chase their lives doing that, but not living good, decent lives or truthfully, what can I say, inspiring lives. So how do you repurpose your life? Yeah, at the end of the day, you can still be ambitious and want to do it, but you do it with true purpose. So I would say that's probably my two.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe the last one, as an executive or maybe director at Deloitte and partner, I believe you do a lot of
IBM.
or IBM. Okay, thanks. I believe you do a lot of talks now in different places, to inspire as a leader. Maybe for someone who's looking to do a very impactful and memorable talk, what advice do you have for them if they want to achieve that goal?
Well, I think if you look at some of the key topics that people are doing, business transformation is a big topic. Everybody wants to know, how do you digitally transform an organization?
Yeah.
How do you grow an organization through the use of innovative technology? So that's something that's very top of mind. Another thing that's top of mind now is generative AI. Everybody's talking about it. The emergence of Chat GPT. For example, from an IBM perspective, we created Watson X, which is our IBM platform for AI. So that's a big focus out there. Digital transformation is a big topic. But I think the other big topic is sustainability.
Yeah.
Everybody is saying, how do we become sustainable? But the reality, the cost of becoming sustainable is too heavy. So people talk sustainability, but when they realize what the effort and the cost that needs to go in, they're not able to do it. So a big question is, how do you integrate sustainability as the way you do things? So by doing things in a different way. And I think the other big topic now is purposeful leadership. There's lots of leaders out there, but are you purposeful? If you look at the millenniums, how they make decisions, they will. If the product is the greatest product, but they're not happy with the value system of the leadership and the organization, they're choosing not to do business with those companies. So purposeful leadership, where you truly believe that there's a key purpose and you live that purpose, is an important thing. So those are kind of the topics that I think. So if I had to sum it, it's business transformation, purposeful leadership, the use of innovative technologies such as AI and how that can revolutionize the world.
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, one of our leaders had a discussion with Malcolm Gladwell. You'll see I posted it on LinkedIn a few days ago. And to ask him what's his view on AI and what would be good. I think the two things, if I remember, he said the one thing, it'll be great if AI can pay all my bills. And the second thing was if AI can help with making breakfast for his daughter so he doesn't have to wake up very early in the morning.
Yeah. Okay, Kevin. Now, lastly, how does one get hold of your book? I understand it's available in these big stores nationwide. Let's say someone wants a signed copy from you. How do they get hold of you? And how much is a copy?
Okay, so the book's available in Takealot, Loot, Amazon, and Exclusive Books. But if you'd like a personalized signed copy, you can contact me. You can either contact me on LinkedIn, or you can contact me on my email. My email is Kevin, KEVIN.Govender, the number 1 at yahoo.com. Or you're welcome to call me on my cell phone or send me a WhatsApp on my cell phone. My number is 083-450-7540. And I'm more than happy. The cost of the book signed copy is 320 Rand.
Thank you so much. I will make sure to share your email address as well as your LinkedIn profile in the link of this episode, so that people can be able to reach you. Right. I think I'm done from my side. Kevin, anything else you'd like to share, perhaps from the book or generally in terms of this interview?
No, I think firstly, thank you very much for selecting me to be part of this. It's a pleasure. It was always good speaking to you. I mean, you're a published author as well. I'm actually busy with my second book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's very different. It's called The Fragmented World.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's about I brought in the elements of polycrisis. So I'm looking at how the world has changed and how we need to mend a fragmented world. So that's my next step. The problem is finding the time to put it together. I've done all the research. I've designed the structure of the book. I just need time now to write the book. That's
Okay.
my next.
Maybe when is your target date? When are you looking to release it, to publish it?
My target date was end of this year, but I'm far from that. So it's probably going to have to be sometime next year.
Okay.
So
No, I'll be on
let's say 2024, sometime in 2024.
Okay, cool. No, I'll be on the lookout for that. And as soon as it's out, maybe I will read it and then invite you again into the podcast.
No, thank you. And thank you very much.
You are welcome. And thank you also to you. And now to all our viewers, thank you for staying tuned until the end of this episode. Thank you for your time. And for now, we are done. Till next time, cheers.